Hi, folks, and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Visual Decay podcast. I'm your host, Justin Keever, and with me today is a guest who has graciously joined us for our inaugural episode. A prolific games critic, let's player, that's what I'm going to open with, podcaster, scholar, professor. Can one be a prolific professor? Nah. But just a frankly, and I don't mean to exaggerate, but I mean this, and just an absolute titan in terms of games coverage and games criticism, Cameron Kunzelman. Thank you for being here.
I reject number one, thank you. Number two, I reject titan. Other than like, you ever play Bloodborne?
I sure have, yeah.
You know the one reborn. You know, this like big damned creature made up of all kinds of garbage and trash and dead stuff and things that don't exist anymore.
Yeah, the big conglomerate thing.
Yeah, that's me. That's if by Titan, that's what you're talking about. That's it's the one reborn.
I'll accept
out of an orb. That's how I wake up every morning too. I come out of the orb.
It's kind of like like a bunch of people ring some bells and you droop out of an orb.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you remember when the killers said they were coming out of their cage and they were doing just fine? You remember that from our youth?
I do remember that. Yeah.
That's me coming out of the orb every morning.
Oh man, well, thank you for that wonderful image that I'm sure our listeners will carry with us for the rest of this podcast.
Yeah, all the elder millennials.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I mean, I'm pretty sure that my audience on YouTube, and frankly, probably the audience that reads. Myself and my colleagues on Visual Decay are probably all elder millennials, if I had to guess.
Great, very good.
So you know, you're hitting the demographic. We're doing great. The numbers are going up.
I'm going to help you out here.
Yeah.
I'm going to get some Zoomers and I'm going to get some Gen Xers. Okay. You ready?
Yeah.
Hey Zoomers, skibbity toilet. Hey Gen Xers, sellouts, man. There you go.
All right. Awesome. Anywho, for folks who are not familiar with your work, which I'll say if you're familiar with my work and you're here and you don't know, and you've never encountered Cameron's work, you probably just know me personally, and that's how you're listening to this. But just in case, if you wanted to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I mean, the vast majority of what I'm doing these days is over at Ranged Touch, rangedtouch.com. It's down in the show notes below. I'm just going to assert that. Yeah, we do podcasts of cultural criticism, probably is the best thing that we say. So we do some internet culture stuff. We do some stuff broadly about literature and theoretical investigation of stuff in the world, I would say. And we do a bunch of different stuff. They're shows for you to waste your time with, as all shows are. Mm-hmm. You know, you got a lot of time between birth and the grave. You got to fill it up somehow. So number one. But number two, they're mostly things of, Michael Lutz and I are kind of the main producers on the show in the sense of like we make the most stuff. We have the most shows. So that's things like Game Studies Study Buddies, where we read books of game studies once a month, and kind of walk through that in a way that hopefully everyone can kind of follow along with. You don't have to be a specialist to listen to the show or an academic in any kind of way. You probably need to be curious about the world, but lots of people are curious about the world. We did Homestuck Made This World, which is like a long form, it was a like an 18-month or so investigation into the history of Homestuck, and we kind of close read it and kind of couched it and all kinds of stuff, and that was part of a book project that Michael is working on, writing a book on Homestuck, which is fascinating. He's working away at that currently. We do Shelved by Genre with Austin Walker, where we read through works of genre literature and just talk about it. And hopefully that's in a fun and friendly and leisurely way. So if you want to read along with, say, Book of the New Sun with us, or currently right now, I don't know when this is coming out, but we're recording this, we're a little ways into A Canticle for Leibowitz. We're doing a post-apocalypse unit where we're just talking about that stuff. So, in these shows, what we do is we use some of our academic-ish training in order to kind of couch and contextualize and discuss these things, and people enjoy it. They like it. And we've done other stuff, too, like Michael and I did Too Much Future, which is kind of a close reading investigation of the Fallout games. Danny and I do Too Much Future, which is kind of walking through Baldur's Gate games and that lineage of isometric RPGs, all kinds of stuff like that. And then I've written a lot for different websites and about games and all that kind of stuff for years. I'm currently, I guess, a monthly columnist for Rascal Media. If people want to check that out, they do tabletop stuff, and I'm writing on RPGs and miniatures over there once a month. No, I've got some other stuff coming out soon. But yeah, podcasts are really what I'm up to the most these days for people to check out.
Very cool. Thank you. Yeah, and I will say I'm a loyal Game Study Buddies listener. I'm a loyal Just King Things listener. And yeah, it's just,
I didn't even mention stuff. Just King Things. We talked about the works of Stephen King the works of Stephen King in publication order. I normally don't have to say that. That's Michael. He says that at the beginning.
Yeah.
So I don't have it locked in.
Yeah, it's really fantastic stuff. Recommend everyone check out Range Touch if you somehow have not already. But also, Cameron, you are a scholar. You have written. You currently have one book published. The World is Born from Zero. And the subtitle is Speculation in Video Games. Am I getting that right?
Sure. I mean, I believe you.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe on speculation in video games. I can't. I don't know off the dome what the subtitle is.
And then, but you also have two more books coming out. Yep. One on Assassin's Creed that's coming out through University of Minnesota Press later this year, right. I think. And then you have a book on Magic the Gathering kind of coming out. And do you know when that's coming out exactly?
No, I don't know exactly when that's coming out. I'm working on the full draft still, and it's coming along. It will be submitted relatively soon, and that's coming out with the MIT Press. And I don't know what the schedule is. It will determine when I turn it in, probably. But I'm working on it, and I've done all of the research and the interviews and the archival stuff. So it's just kind of assembling it finally together. And I have like a pretty disciplined writing schedule all summer. So theoretically, by July, early August, it'll be in. Fingers crossed.
Cool. And I guess what I wanted to kind of ask about, big picture about kind of both of these book projects is, so these are both kind of gigantic franchises, right? I mean, Magic the Gathering has been, if Google is to be believed, has been going for as long as I've been alive, so nearly 32 years. And then Assassin's Creed has been going for almost 20 years. Yep. So in addition to kind of the big questions of method that you get into when you're beginning a big academic monograph, there's also just frankly like so much kind of in these two. I'm just going to use the word franchises for them. Like they're big media franchises. Yeah. And I guess I want to get a sense of how do you approach a book length project on something that is as big as Magic the Gathering or as big as Assassin's Creed? Like, what was your kind of way into both of these things as you're starting?
Well, I think a big part of it is about thinking about method, and during the writing process for Assassin's Creed, during the pitching process and the writing. So the name of that book is Everything is Permitted on Assassin's Creed. It is up for pre-order right now. You can go to the University of Minnesota Press website and pre-order it. Please go pre-order the book. I think you can also get it on the Bald Devil's website, but I prefer from the press itself. Please go pre-order the book. That would help me out. It's a leisurely 200 some odd pages. But at the beginning of the pitch process for both of these books, which I guess probably started in 2020, I would say. I actually have no idea, but I know that I wrote a draft for a different press of the pitch for the Magic book in 2020. So yeah, so these have been projects on my mind for a long time. And but during every part of the process, right? So the initial pitch process, talking to press editors, pitching to some people who didn't want it, then pitching to other people who did for these books. Every time it came up, the question of size and scale, right? Which is like, we are trained as academics to find a hyper specific niche. And then find as someone with a recent PhD, I'm sure you love this language, because in graduate school it's so like pushed upon you, right? But your intervention, find your intervention. What is your intervention, right? And in the world that we actually occupy, right, in the world of like talking to human beings about things they're interested in, which is not necessarily academia, right? Sometimes those things are related, but often they're not. The work of academia and its kind of cloistering often produces incentives that are maybe a little alternate, right, or different from like normal conversational ones, meaning that I can talk to anyone on the planet in a bar about Assassin's Creed or Magic the Gathering, and we will have something to talk about if they know what those things are, because I've done it many, many times. But that's not necessarily, that kind of conversation doesn't get like verified in academia, right? You have to like narrow down. You have to say these very specific things or whatever.
Yeah.
And to my mind, you know, I'm not interested in writing the book about a hyper-specific topic within Assassin's Creed. And I do think, generally, and I have enough experience to say that this is true, right? Meaning that I've released enough written material, I've released enough audio material, I've seen the numbers for both of those things over the past decade. There are lots and lots of people in the world who are interested in in-depth conversations about the things they care about. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I'm not even of the opinion, and I actually bristle sometimes of the kind of criticism of academia. Sometimes this criticism is correct, but I still bristle, that, like, the academic language is too bad, and you need to change the way you talk about these things. Actually, you don't have to do that at all. People outside academia often would like to hear some language to describe the world they live in, right? That's like part of what we get to do. It's what's awesome about academia and graduate school and all the things about it. It might be the only good thing about it, right? Which is that you get to encounter language and modes of interpretation and ways of thought and ways of seeing the world that you might not have thought about before. And then you get to apply those to things you care about. Theoretically. Now, not everyone gets to do that. Not everyone wants to do that. But that is what I took from graduate school and what lots of people I know took from it too. Yeah. And that's to say, like, other people who don't do that, right? Like, other people who haven't either had those opportunities or weren't built for graduate school in the sense that they don't want to do those things, or they find the idea of sitting in those rooms for so many hours deeply depressing, or they had parts of their life that prevented them from doing that, right? Like, I lived on very little money for a very long time. And, like, you know, my career didn't start for a decade, right? You know, I'm deeply far behind the like earning capability of everyone else in my, you know, age bracket, because I basically took a pause out of the market for nearly a decade in order to do that stuff, right? And so all those people, they actually want the things that we do, right? I say this, and I've said this many times before, I think that the people who are interested in intellectual endeavors across the board, what their issue with academia is not the stuff you do in academia. It is the framework of academia. And often in education, where our students bristle the most, it is not with the stuff we do. It's not with the thinking. It's not with the using examples. It's not with the theorization. It is the way that we put those into practice and we mobilize those things. Shocker, people don't like sitting for an hour and 15 minutes and hearing anyone drone on and just talk the whole time. It's just not a thing. Yeah. Unless they're a podcast listener. And then, but hats off to you, podcast listeners. We love you. So I say all of that to say, right, that I went into this project, into both of these projects, with a fair amount of data in my knapsack about what you can get away with and still have an audience. I see a little cat in the background. I'm deeply distracted now.
Yeah.
He's got a funny little face about him.
He does have a funny little face.
He does.
I'm sorry, go on.
He's going.
Yeah.
But that's all to say, right? So I went into these projects being able to say, well, no, look, I have the data from games criticism for a long time, which, you know, sometimes games criticism doesn't carry as much power in economic ad selling power, right? But the average person, the average number of views on a piece of games criticism, the most banal, like in Crusader Kings 3, you're engaged with European monarchies. What does that mean, right? What we would consider, I think, a fairly straightforward piece of games criticism is just analyzing the cultural context of the thing. The number of people who look at that are not enough to justify paying for it, generally, right? There's a reason why games criticism waxes and wanes quite often, is that it just doesn't carry the same numbers as many other things do, right? That are kind of built for SEO and bring people in and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But those numbers are way higher than the sales numbers or reader numbers for any piece of academic work ever, right? Like, the worst thing in the commercial zone is still doing quite a bit better than your average kind of academic piece. And so I'm able to come into these conversations, pitching these books, contextualizing these books, talking about these books, of saying, look, I know that there is both an academic audience for this because I understand how to write theoretically for that, or at least hook it into these conversations that academics will find interesting and validating for their own parts of scholarship that, are perhaps different from mine. But I also know how to write it in such a way that the people who are invested in thinking about games in the world, right, that they will find it at least interesting. And that is a really long answer to the question you asked. But the reason I say that really long answer is to say that that's what allows me to take a wider scope and scale, right? And to approach it as a bigger thing. And I began this answer by saying, that's some of the feedback that I got early on. For both the Assassin's Creed book and for the Magic book, I received feedback that was essentially, this is an impossible book to write.
Right.
And the Assassin's Creed book is done. So like when it comes out, when people have it in their hand, they can tell me if it was a wasted endeavor. And maybe it was. I don't know. I had a good time writing it. I think it's a fun book. I read through the page proofs recently, and I was in some places astonished because I was like, I don't know who wrote this. Like, this is good. Like, this is way better than I thought it was. And the Magic book, I think, is actually going to be. I initially thought it was going to be a kind of straightforward book of like, look, no one's written a book on magic. I'm hitting the kind of markers that we need for other people who work in this field to kind of, reference the monography kind of pieces. But I've done a bunch of interviews with people. I've done a bunch of archival work. I've done a bunch of kind of internet web pagey, Usenet posty kind of stuff. And I think it's actually a much more theoretically engaging book now than I thought it was going to be when I started it. I don't know if that makes it more possible or not, but certainly it is much more complicated than I thought. So that's all to say, yeah, I think your impulse there of like, what methods verify this? In academia, we're so focused on like, what are the we've all chosen our little tools, and then we have to justify why we use our tools, right? Yeah. And nowhere else in the crafting world do you have to do that, right? In woodworking, no one fires you for like not using the wood plane the right way. It's about the final product. And so it's a little bit rare, I guess, but before you do the thing, that someone gets to give you the feedback of, I don't think these tools will work on the thing that you're building. But I think the tools are working. I think that has allowed me to go big. And it's because, you used the language of franchises earlier, it's because I've leaned pretty heavily on some of the language and ideas that are coming out of things like franchise studies, which I didn't really know all that much about beforehand, but I've kind of dug into. I really enjoyed it. It ended up having a bigger impact than it did, like conceptual impact than it did citational impact. I mean, I think I referenced in the book a couple times, but really the framework of Scott Bukatman's book on Hellboy. It's called maybe Hellboy's World or something. Even if you don't care about comic studies, that's a book that is like worth checking out. I think it's a really Scott Bukatman has a big impact on me over and over again in my academic career. He's written on lots of different stuff, but that's just legitimately a really interesting book on what do you do with this kind of big amalgamated world that is in some ways a franchise in a traditional way and in some ways is not a franchise in a traditional way? And how do all these pieces that don't fit together, at least other than sharing some characters, how do they actually cohere to make a whole that people are invested in? And just really interesting book. But of course, had to kick out to Star Wars and Marvel and all those other things too, to find some kind of, not even methods necessarily, but some grounding language. And hopefully my finding that grounding language and putting it together in a slightly different context of games makes that grounding language available for both an academic audience and an audience that's curious but not interested in throwing a bunch of money in a hole in order to ostensibly learn about this stuff.
Yeah. Wow. First, thank you for that, like, really kind of like holistic and very, well thought through answer. And two kind of follow-ups that I had were, one, I just wanted to quickly say that, first, I think you're absolutely correct that there is an audience that is kind of like broadly hungry for close analysis of the things that they like. Like, I remember my kind of a big moment where I suddenly, this is maybe this was the wrong lesson to take away, but I think it was a good thing. Where I suddenly really started to care about analysis, or not about analysis, but about like academia, or consider academia as like an aspirational thing, something that could produce the kinds of writing I wanted to see in the world was frankly reading Brendan Keogh's Killing is Harmless.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
just a nice, like just a good book long, beat by beat engagement with Spec Ops: The Line, a thing that I really cared about at the point where that, when that game came out, when that book came out, when I was an undergrad.
Yeah.
And yeah, just massively influential on me. So yeah, so I think you're right that there is an audience who is maybe not like bought into academia, because I would say like undergrads haven't really bought into academia.
No,
as, like,
they're
a
mostly here
project,
for
right?
professionalization, right?
Yeah.
They want to they have either a class reproduction idea, right? Like my parents went to college and I therefore want to go to college and do similar things to them, or they have a class aspirational aspect, right? Like they are one class and want to become a different one, right? That's why I went to college exclusively. Like I liked thinking or whatever, right? And I was okay at it, I guess, but I went to college so I would not be working class, right? In the way that my parents had been. And that, like, bluntly, that's why I was there, right? I did very poorly in things I didn't care about, and I did really well in things I did care about. And I was there to get specific grades in order to, like, not build, the thing that I did right before I went to college is I built pools. And I worked in fast food, and both of those things were bad, right?
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean there's not like, it doesn't mean you can't do those things. And I did those, and I had like good social relationships there, and I like still know quite a few of the people that I did that stuff with. My family grew up working class; they are still working class people. My brother is a construction worker, all this kind of stuff, right? Like, I have deep attachments to that, but sometimes I think in academic conversations, we're not cynical enough, right, about the thing. And I ended up in a position, right, of thinking, but like, I only came to it because I had working class parents who still like to think about things, right? Who like watched movies and would be like, that was really weird how that looked. Or, like watching The Ring and being like, oh, isn't that weird that they crawled out of the TV? How did they do that? We had these theoretical conversations, the same kind of conversations you would have about the historiography or history or production or how the sausage is made. I've talked many times on Just King Things about, and Michael has too, about conversations with his mother about these books that we all read together, right? Those were literary conversations. Those are analytical conversations. My mother just never had the opportunity or really the bandwidth to do anything beyond a high school education, and worked really hard to make it possible for me, right? So like, I come to this knowing that as you're saying, right, like, lots of people aren't bought in, but they do like to think, right? Yeah. And they like to think about the world we live in. And like, the idea that this is cloistered away is just not great. Brendan's book's a really good example of that. Darius Kazemi and I just roasted the shit out of that book when it came out. And I stand by all the criticisms I had of it, but that it is a really, it's a profound, I would say. I think your reaction that you had is a common one. I've talked to lots of people just slightly younger than I am, because I was in graduate school when that came out. Yeah. But so just slightly younger than I am, who that had a major impact on. Brendan's probably ruined, I don't know, dozens of lives of sending people to graduate school because of Killing is Harmless. At one point, he wanted to do like I guess when the 10th anniversary came along a couple years ago, he wanted to do a 10th anniversary edition where like we had some additional essays, and so like inviting some of the people who were really critical of it to come back in. And he didn't do it, but maybe I'll pressure him for the 15th. Maybe we'll try to get that going.
Yeah, got a couple of years, enough time to pull that together. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, it's like 2012, 2013, something like that. Is that when that came out?
Like 2012, I think. Well, the book, I think the game 2012, the book, I'm not sure.
Yeah, the book was pretty shortly after.
Yeah.
So like a year or a year and a half. Self-published, by the way, right? Like, just made it as a PDF and released it.
Yeah. I mean, exactly.
People bought it.
Like, there was you'll probably know better than me. There was a very short like self-published book on Metal Gear Rising. I remember the Twitter handle at the time, but not the name of the writer, which I feel very very bad about.
Hold on. Harper J.
Yes.
But I'm trying to figure out the name of the book.
It's got to be called Rules of Nature, right? Is it?
It is Rules of Nature. Yeah, you got it. You got it. Yeah. Yeah,
That or
Harper
Red
did
Sun.
that. There are a
or, yeah.
couple other
Yeah.
people, Bullet Points have done there, a couple
Oh yeah. Yeah.
things in that nature. Yeah, there's still a fairly robust world of people doing those kind of self-published things. And so, yeah, all of that's to say, like, the last thing I guess about those kind of perspectival pieces, right, is like I've written in the public sphere, in the hell zone of video game writing for a very long time, of criticism about video games, and I also don't really have any fear about being wrong,
Yeah.
which is to say that like academia impresses upon you a deep paranoia around criticism, which is to say that like you need to cross your T's and dot your I's, otherwise you will be made a fool of in front of, I don't know, 15 people. And like I just don't I just like, I've gone through several just nightmare zones around that where I don't have any issue with being the person that publishes the book that is true to what I think is going on and makes some heavy guesses and some like serious inquiries into the thing. I think The World is Born from Zero has a lot of that in it, of like, here's my interpretation, here's what I think about that. It's not hedging infinitely around that stuff, and so I think that makes me a little bit more willing, and maybe other people want to do this too. I don't know, but I did kind of pitch the Assassin's Creed book with being like, half of this book is like hardcore theory about Assassin's Creed and what I think it does in a kind of media theoretical way. That like anyone can read, but it's engaging in some pretty specific pillars of theoretical engagement. And I'm going to use those to do some really specific reads of some really specific games. And that's what the thing is. It is not a book, I don't think, people will be able to read it and tell me if I'm wrong, but it's not a book written defensively. And I think that most big scalar stuff, if people do it, I think academia and scholarship often encourages them to write very defensively, which is to like make sure that your whole, your refuge is buttoned up against attack. And I think I've been, very much the beneficiary of reading lots of really good criticism and lots of good scholarship that doesn't begin from that position. And I'm very lucky to have come out of a program that did not encourage me to write that way. And so that was a significant benefit to taking on these projects, which are weighty and big and complicated.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'll say that, like, unfortunately, I do feel that kind of like that impulse to write defensively still. And that's a thing that I've been trying to shake off. It's a thing that actively prevents me from writing very frequently. Like I've been trying to, write non-academic work again, to produce non-academic content, if you will. And that, like the barrier really is like this kind of, the need to be completely right, or like the need to kind of like shore yourself up against attack. And that's, I don't know. Like I find it to be very paralyzing, I suppose. And
absolutely.
I think that's hard. I hope that, I hope that more people kind of come out of graduate school, I suppose, feeling more comfortable kind of being wrong, or like trying out ideas, and, like knowing that just because a thing is published, it does not represent the whole of you as a person, I guess.
Yeah.
And that we live in time and can change.
Which we're not encouraged to ever think of ourselves in those terms, right? In academia, and I guess in criticism too, right? There's a, and like some people, look, we are both of very specific identity categories where we are afforded a particular ability to not have to be defensive, right? And I've generally, what's really interesting is when I started writing about games, because of my first name and because of the things I wrote about, it was often assumed that I was a woman for a very long time. People assumed I was a woman. I don't really know why. But it was only until like I hit a certain level of like people knew who I was that kind of went away. And the criticism that I got was very different, right? Like having had the experience of it a little bit, right? And not in the same way that, any random person, any random, non-white guy writing about games does, right? I've not had that experience, but I got a taste of it in a very particular kind of way in forum. And it's radically different. So there's a lot of things that afford my capability to do that, but I think that I was really benefited, have been benefited by the fact that I have a lot of academic friends who I've met in graduate school or things like that, but really my friends, in terms of like the friends I've had for a long time, none of them do any of this, right? They are in various different fields, but they're not academics. You know, I have academic friends, but that's not, you know, my longest friend group, which is very helpful. Just in terms of being like, yeah, we all just have jobs, right? And we like engage with this stuff. And the other thing is like being really heavily engaged in the popular criticism stuff around games, but in other things, right? Like I'm a big consumer of like random zines from random people, and I like to dive into weird little sub communities. I like the kind of alt philosophy people who, you know, used to do stuff around like the new realisms and all of that, right? Which I have a lot of fidelity for still.
Yeah.
And so I've been able to kind of dive into and be engaged in these kinds of pockets of intellectual engagement that doesn't see itself as needed to be verified by the Academy in any kind of way, while still being serious, while still being, I don't know, while still holding itself to account, right? Like in terms of its solidity. You know, I've done a lot of work with Chris Hunt over the years, filmmaker, musician. Chris and I have done a lot of stuff, and he's someone who I would say that, right? Who like Chris will show up to an academic event, or he'll go to like a weird philosophy thing, or he'll like do a deep dive on, you know, some obscure, you know, conceptual academic movement or whatever. But he's not invested in that. He's a filmmaker. He's a musician, and like that's his thing. But he like will travel these other paths, and I've been very blessed to have, you know, kind of many different little communities that I've plugged into over the years that are doing that too, right? Like. The general intellect breeds everywhere, right? And just because there's like one gerbil farm where we think it all happens doesn't mean it is.
Yeah. Man, so sorry, I have like four directions I want to go, and I guess first one, just as a quick follow up, I guess like what alt philosophy stuff have you been checking out lately? I've been kind of I used to be like I was briefly an Acid Horizon listener, and I'm not sure like what the new like. What the new cool stuff is out there.
Yeah, I kind of fell off of. I would say that's the Acid Horizon moment was probably the last time I was paying attention to like the alt, you know, I don't know, alt philosophy, whatever that stuff is. And I love to those people. This is not a criticism of those, but I got tired of the like, and there were several podcasts I was listening to that are kind of this thing of like, we all read an article and now we're going to riff for an hour and a half. I kind of got tired of that, right? But while still continuing, you know, I read Matt Colhoun's stuff and you know, the writing there I find much more engaging for my life at this moment. I guess the last thing in that universe, you know, I'm still a big urbanomic reader. I've been reading urbanomic stuff since before graduate school, right? So probably like 2009 is when I started paying attention to Collapse and all that kind of stuff over there. But, you know, the recent stuff that emanated from that zone I read Cute Accelerationism, is that what it's called? The Maya B. Chronic book?
I'm not sure.
I think it's Maya B. Chronic and Amy Ireland maybe did it. Let me check here. Cute Accelerationism is the book they did. Yeah, you should check that out. I mean, I like Amy Ireland stuff a lot. That's that same zone of stuff. I don't know. It's like kind of where I'm at. I have keyed much more into like DIY wargaming people for like the past year. That's kind of like the thing I'm plugged into at this moment. Like weird small print 28mm games or whatever, and so that's like the intellectual movement that I think I'm most invested in this moment.
Nice.
In terms of like philosophy stuff, what have I just read Jennifer Doyle's book, Shadow of My Shadow. Hard book to read, FYI, dear listener. That's a book that's about you know, if people are not familiar with Jennifer Doyle stuff, she wrote Campus Sex, Campus Security, which was kind of this engagement with Title IX as an apparatus and what it does. But Shadow of My Shadow gets a little bit more explicitly into that and about the stalking that she experienced, and that kind of uses that as a way of getting into a broader kind of theoretical investigation about the current moment we live in. I mean, that sounds big and generic, and it is kind of big, but it's a book that's not afraid to indict reality as it stands. I really found that profound. I got my breaks redone, and I just sat and read the whole thing in like the office of this break shop while J.D. Vance was blaring at me at maximum volume. It was a very, very weird, very, very bizarre place to be in. But those are the kind of two big like theory books I would say I've read recently.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you for well, the recommendations. Frankly,
And yeah, I recommend both of those
Yeah.
books. Those are two books I found invigorating.
Cool. I'll put them in the show notes. And so you also mentioned, and this is to alter the tone, I suppose, a little bit. Hopefully not too artificially, because you just mentioned kind of getting into like the mini wargaming space, which
Yeah.
I want to ask about because that is, well, selfishly, because that's something that I have been varying degrees of kind of I don't know, enmeshed with over the last few years, kind of like since COVID. I started painting Warhammer stuff, and off mic you said that you cannot bring yourself, you are a mini painter now. You post some really wonderful painted minis, but you said you cannot bring yourself to paint Warhammer stuff. Why not?
I can't bring myself to paint 40K. I think
40K. Oh, okay.
I just don't care about all these so that's where I started. And I painted like a whole Tau combat patrol.
Yeah.
And when I came out of that is like, I don't ever in my life want to paint a big flat panel ever again. Mm-hmm. And 40K is just full of big flat panels. No matter where you look, you're looking at a big flat surface. Sometimes a curved surface. And I just don't care for that. And so, yeah, I'm much more in the universe of Age of Sigmar, so Warhammer Fantasy kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The old world, I like those things. I've recently my summer, I like saved up some money, did all the stuff, bought a 3D resin printer,
Nice.
print my ass off. Been really doing that. Been really just like completely obliterating my body with terrible chemicals. You know what I mean? Like you really feel the microplastics accumulating in your body when you're doing 3D resin printing. And so, so that's like the zone that I've been in. And yeah, we've been doing that for, I would say, a little over a year now. And I say we because it came from an episode of talking about range touch. Every month Danny and I just do, a what we call the Range Touch Monthly, where we're just shooting the shit. This year is the year of TTRPGs. Really, it's the year of tabletop, so we just kind of talk about what we're doing. And we kind of inaugurated the year of TTRPGs with by going to PAX Unplugged, and then we went to Adepticon. And we'll be doing those again this year, the next 2 cycles. But yeah, it came from him being like, we're doing Warhammer now. And I was like, all right, I guess. And then we started, and I've kept up with it. And I think he's a board gamer in his heart, I think. And I think he likes a good Warhammer, and I think he likes a good tactical skirmish game. But I think in his heart, he's not, in the deepest part of his soul, he is a board gamer and not a war gamer. And I think I've discovered that in my heart, I am a war gamer.
Okay. Huh. And I guess how do you draw that distinction? Like that's just kind of a
I need
big
that
question,
damn tape
but...
measure.
Okay, yeah. Okay, got it. Yeah.
I no. There's something about the customizability. I did an interview. It's actually free, so you don't have to pay any money for it. But you can go over to the Range Touch Patreon, dear listener. And I did an interview with Matt, aka Totally Not Panicking, who's like a fairly well-known person, I would say, in the tabletop miniatures painting universe. And he does a thing called Smash Bash, which is a big kit bashing thing. And I would say that Matt's work is really arts driven first, in the sense of like, it's about making a cool piece of art that then might have some gameplay for someone somewhere. And what he said during that interview, which I'd never thought about before, but which I think I find really compelling as much as he does, and maybe is what brought me into this, is he said that, there's something really interesting about kit bashing and doing art where you make an individual bespoke piece, right? You make a one-of-one model at the end of it that only you would have made. Only you would have made these decisions of taking these different things together, or like painting it in this way, or doing this out of something that is fundamentally mass-produced in mass culture, which is like these injection molded, sprues that in fact you are within the culture of Warhammer, you are probably most rewarded for not doing that, right? For painting all your Space Marines to look the same way and have the right trim and all that kind of stuff. And so, at least in a gameplay sense. And so I think that's part of it for me, is like, I like taking the thing and then like riffing on it, right? It's the same way that I enjoyed making music. I've made music before, and I'm like not trained in that, and I might not even make good music, but I find it really interesting to like take pre-existing pieces or ideas or like snippets of like ambient tone music or whatever, and then like reorchestrating them and putting them together and then layering them and doing all this kind of stuff to make a different thing that like kind of came out of my head somewhere. And I find the same thing about the miniatures, and I like that scales upward in miniature games. So I've started playing. I think I'm going to have like a little campaign group of Necropolis 28.
Okay.
Which you can get the rules for free on the creator's Patreon. I'm blanking on Victor something is his name. But it's just a, like Mordheim-esque, you make a little warband and you have a certain number of points, and it's like in a vast undead world where like there are these different factions of the undead underneath. I think it's called like the Child Goddess or something. It's this like infinitely resurrected undead lord or whatever. So there's like pseudo vampires and there's like skeletons and there's like zombies, and they're kind of different factions. But the idea behind it is you like specifically as a diorama based game. So the idea is you build a beautiful little diorama and then you play these really small scale like 3-4 unit skirmish tactical games inside of the thing. And I find every part of that beautiful, right? The idea of like, I'm going to make 3 models that are exactly what I want them to be. And I'm going to build a board that's exactly what I want it to be. I'm building a graveyard, like Necropolis board right now. I was actually doing it right before we recorded. And I just find the opportunity for specific creation within bounds to be really affirming and interesting to me in wargaming, whereas like for board games I just don't, right? Like I don't like the idea. It doesn't feel particularly interesting for me to like execute the rules strategically. Like I'm not very good at miniature war games, but I enjoy playing miniature war games. I don't really enjoy playing board games, and I'm not very good at board games, right? So a lot of the things I find interesting about video games that I enjoy, like a Crusader Kings or something like that. That same little bit of my brain or whatever is affirmed in miniature wargaming of like, ooh, here's a system, and let's play in a little system, and it's happening at the level of artistic production, not just at the level of gameplay or whatever.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, because that kind of resonates a little bit with my experience. Like I played 40K during 9th edition, and I am terrible at 40K. I am fucking awful at war games. But what I found was it was at the moment where I could finally field an army that was fully painted, and then I could basically just take pictures during the thing and sort of like use the premise of a tactical war game to take action shots of little guys fighting was kind of like the moment where I actually started having fun.
Yeah.
And so like I think there is something kind of and that was sort of the approach during COVID, where I've actually picked up 40K, was kind of, I'm not going to be able to see anybody, so what this thing is in its entirety right now is an art project. This is a focused little art project, and that was actually something as kind of lockdowns, such as they were, kind of began to end, that the min-maxer in me kind of came back, and like the joy kind of got sapped from painting, because it became painting toward a goal of playing the thing rather than painting for its own sake. Yeah.
I mean, have you tried to play like a Mordheim or any of the other kind of campaign-based play stuff? Or what is the Forbidden Psalm? Is that the name of the game?
Okay.
Yeah, it is Forbidden Psalm. Do you know this game?
I don't know. I really no. Most of the community out here is kind of like, there's a competitive Warhammer kind of community, and then the people that I know who would be interested in like and have the time for that kind of thing have all kind of left the area. So
interesting.
Yeah.
We'll have to follow up on this at a later date.
Yeah,
definitely. See what's up. But Forbidden Psalm is pretty interesting. I haven't played it yet, but I've like kept up with it a little bit, or at least read up on it. Because it has solo play rules. And so the idea is like scenarios, and then you like make your little, your little war band of people, and then you can like do the solo play stuff. And there's also co-op apparently, which is pretty
cool. Yeah, I've been I'll plant the seed right now. I've been planning to do a series of like solo board gaming reviews, because I've been kind of getting into that, and I think that playing a board game solo raises very kind of strange questions about why the hell you play a board game if not for social interaction? Like, what is like specific about like, you know, internalizing rule sets and manipulating little dudes? Like, what is the pleasure of that? But anyway, so look out for that, dear listener, down the line. But anyway, moving on.
I mean, but that's I mean, I want to say something about that, right? Which is like, that is actually the reason. That's, I think, why I enjoy wargaming. Why I enjoy like a particular weird little subset of like solo games. So, for example, I'm doing this research project over the summer with a student on life path generator games, right? So, like, you know, the idea of like, you know, in Cyberpunk 2020, right? I wrote this blog post about it recently as well. But, you know, the idea is like, you just roll in this chart. Like, what happened? You know, you when you were born, from the time your character was born to the time you started playing, what happened? And, you know, Cyberpunk and lots of other games have these little charts, you know, you roll on to determine it. I find that so fascinating. I find that more interesting than playing games often, this like generation thing. And I think part of it, and this is something that Danny and I have talked about a lot, right, which is like, I do not enjoy board games as a supplement to or as a thing that affords social interaction.
Okay.
I just don't need that, you know, or want it. Maybe need it, whatever. Want it. I don't want that at all. I don't want I don't enjoy a game rule set being the thing that like mediates between me and other human beings. I would rather like hang out and talk, watch a movie, you know, do any of these other things that have a meal, you know what I mean? And like lots of people use that, you know, meals, the board games of the ancient world, right? Like they were these, you know, it's the excuse to hang out with people, right? Spend time with them. And I really don't, there's something interesting to me, I think, that has transformed in nerd culture. And I don't know how to explain it or grab onto it. And I wouldn't be the person to do it in any case, but where tabletop gaming and board games have become the excuse to socialize with people, as opposed to an activity, one of many that you could do with other people. You know, there's so much like in the OSR, the old school Renaissance community for people who are not in that, which are people kind of making these throwback games. There's a lot of weird politics involved in that, but it's people generally hearkening back to the early moments of things like Dungeons and Dragons, you know, rules light, role play heavy, blah, 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 all this stuff. And what's really interesting about that is that you read the assumptions that are built into OSR, you read the assumptions that are built into contemporary, in our moment, tabletop games, and then you read what actually used to happen, right, with those other games, and it just describes a completely different social schematic, right? Like, we do not live in the same world as people in Lake Geneva in 1971. We just don't. We, you know, it's like you read about the Gygax, when Arneson gives Gygax those rules, right, the 25 type pages, and like Gygax gets on the horn and calls Arneson his like security company job and is like asking him all of these rules-based questions to clarify what's in the document, right? Like, that's just not the world we occupy of tabletop games and tabletop design and things like that. This was like a fun thing for them to do, or an interesting thing for them to do amongst 1,000 other things that they might do in the Midwest when it was cold. And we have developed broadly in nerds culture, and I say we because I'm absolutely a part of that, but we've developed this like destination sociality around some of these games that I think has detoured or done something strange with them that perhaps they were not initially designed to do. And I find that really fascinating.
Right.
And again, I'm not the person to like make the thing, and I'm not even like demonizing them. I don't necessarily mean this negatively. I just mean it symptomatically. Something has changed, and it's not the same thing that it used to be.
Yeah, and that actually dovetails pretty well into I've been planning this whole podcast to ask you about Magic the Gathering because again, very selfishly, I've been to 3 RCQs this season so far.
Cool. Have you qualified yet?
No, I top 8'd the last one. I was
cool.
playing off meta stuff, and then I've switched to Boros Energy because I'm a jerk.
It turns out if you play the good decks and play the good cards, you win the games.
Yeah, it turns out if you play the best deck in the format, it becomes a lot easier. But I was listening to an episode of the Range Touch podcast where and this was prompted by the episode of Too Much Future that you and Michael just dropped where you talk about the Fallout cards.
Yeah.
And we'll get to Universes Beyond if we have time, don't worry.
Sure,
Yeah, I guess you have a conversation with Danny in that episode about, or in an episode that you kind of cite in the Too Much Future episode. I'm constructing a little apparatus of like of range touch properties for people to go hunt down right now. But you talk about basically like playing Commander, and I think specifically Danny's bad experience playing Commander, and this is an episode from a year ago. But like, what I wanted to kind of ask, just because I'm really curious, then is, in addition to having this kind of big book on Magic coming out, Magic is a game that is both highly competitive, but is also a great has become a great example of the thing you were talking about, where there are certain formats where the idea is basically you are hanging out with people, and that is and Magic is an excuse to hang out with people. But then that format has like the weird social problem where it is a friendly format that actually creates very, very hostile situations when you're playing with strangers, etc. But anyway, so this is all kind of a way to ask, like, what is your relationship with Magic the Gathering?
Mm-hmm.
What's your format? What do you value in that game? And I guess, like, what do you, and how does that affect, I guess, if we wanted to bring it back to these projects that you have coming up and that you're working on, how does that relationship kind of affect the nature of your analysis in the book?
I would have described myself as a non-competitive social player of Magic until non-competitive social play became dominant, and then I realized I was a deeply competitive player. Which is to say, I do not enjoy Commander. I've now joined Danny, a year after that being recorded. And in that episode of the Range Touch Monthly podcast, Danny is describing a 4-player Commander game that we put together with the Fallout decks, which are, these kind of tie-ins with Magic to the Fallout franchise. And where he, like, for lack of a better word, lost his shit. And he, like, wasn't mad, but he was just like, why are we doing this when we could be doing anything else? And it's like watching someone very slowly and patiently, like, take their turn. And it was like, they're complicated decks, and they're not necessarily designed to be... They are decks that are deeply complicated and not interested in onboarding you on how they play. So if you haven't, like, really developed your knowledge of them, you find yourself, like, reading the cards very carefully. There's a lot of text on there. There's all this stuff, right? And so, he just got, like, extremely, like, profoundly frustrated, which is, like, fine, right? He's not a big Commander player ever, right? And I think that is the last time he has played Commander. He will never play again. And I'm kind of in the same boat with him. Because, and to answer the question about the project in the book, is like, I think my book, in terms of like what its big interventions are, will kind of end before the Commander era begins.
Okay.
In the sense of, like, Commander being in Magic the Gathering, Commander has driven product releases for the past 5 years or so, I would say, in the sense of every set, in order to make itself appeal to all of the possible demographics of players, has to have something for Commander players in it. And so, like, each Magic set now is kind of tricky because it needs to have cards that are for this big 4-player pseudo-competitive, pseudo-friendly game format. It's, like, bizarre and weird and has all this social interaction in it. It also needs to have cards for the people who want to play 1v1 competitive games. And so, like, the game has become, each set has become this extremely bizarre melange of just nonsense, right? Where at least, like, 10 years ago, the sets were not as fine-tuned, but they also seem to be a little bit more linear in the sense of, like, there are cards that do specific things, and there's different competitive strategies that are in each set. Whereas now you might find 2 or 3 actively useful competitive strategies in each given set. And some have none. I'm thinking about Murders at Karlov Manor, which had none. Those cards do not appear in competitive play whatsoever. And I think because they were geared in particular ways toward Commander, and that didn't really work out because they weren't powerful enough, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's all to say that I'm kind of in the same boat now. And really what the book is about, and the reason I get away with this, I would say, is it is about, in broad terms, how does the game work and what does it do and what are the kind of cultural resonances that it has. So there's, like, a chapter on the rules. There's a chapter on the management of narrative play, or of the narrative by WotC. There's a chapter on the design, the player types, Johnny, Timmy, Spike, and like how that's been talked about, and where psychogeography comes from, or psychography, not psychogeography, different thing. Psychographics come from. If you don't know the history of psychographics, pretty wild stuff to then turn into the cornerstone of how you develop your game.
Yeah.
So it's it's these bigger parameters I think still hold true for the Commander era. But in some ways, I think it's just irresponsible for me to like actively attempt to completely explain that. Commander needs its own book. And there's nothing I would want more than for my book to come out and then someone write the Commander book, right? Like what happened to that game that verified and transformed and created a set of context for Commander to emerge. Similar thing for Digital Magic and Magic Arena, right? Like that's changed the way the game has worked. Yeah. It is impossible for me to do that and to express that in the one chapter maybe I can give to it. And so I have a chapter on professional play, right? And like what happened, and I've read a lot of archival material, and I will certainly be able to speak to like what happened when that moved on to Arena, because there are some interesting things there, but that's a subchapter. Yeah. And so like look for Jack Murray's book at some point, where Jack Murray will explain to you like what happened when it got adapted to Arena, how did that change the game. So the hope and the plan is that the book provides theoretical tools and language that other people can write better and more specific books about other things in it, right? Mm-hmm. As I've written the thing, I've really found out, I've kind of determined that it's kind of just a book about management, meaning like what are the strategies that Wizards of the Coast as a company have used in order to highlight, absorb, operationalize, and monetize things from the social community that has emerged around Magic.
Okay.
And I've actually gone to the managerial literature to look at that. And, so yeah, there are lots of different places to go to that. But yeah, that's like kind of what the book has turned into in a really surprising way to me, just to be honest. I mean, look, I don't want to like step on my own toes too much, but you would be shocked how many things from the very beginning of Magic, and I'm talking in 1993, were, hey, you're in the Magic community, you're already doing this thing. Can we just like hire you part-time to come and do that thing? Or you've proven, as someone independent from WotC, you've proven that people care about this. Can we just like pull that in and like make that part of Magic as a product, right? That's the beginning of live streamed play. That is the beginning. That's rules management, just to be frank with you, right? That's the origin of kind of the way that rules management worked in the game, is they were watching people do it. They're watching Beth Morsand doing it online and then brought her in and folded her in. So there's lots of stuff around that. The documentaries that got made about Magic, that was people doing stuff that then got brought in. So there's all kinds of stuff, around... it's not language I'm going to use in the book, but it's the apparatus of capture, right? It's like, what are the ways that things are kind of brought into striated space around Magic? Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe that answers the question. I don't know.
No, I mean, it absolutely does. And then, it opens up a certain Deleuzian kind of line of inquiry that I'm tempted to go down, but trying to resist, because I also just want to ask kind of like more naive sort of questions about like, your kind of like relationship to Magic as a player.
Yeah, sure.
Which, I mean, I guess, yeah, first off, just because, look, I want to get to, like, more incisive kind of things, but I also am just curious, like, what's your format? I mean, like, that's kind of like, what is the thing that you play right now?
Up until Modern Horizons 3, I was a Modern player. Okay. And Modern Horizons 3 came out, real in-depth convo for the random listener here. But Modern Horizons 3 came out, and maybe this is a good actual, thing to talk about. Wizards of the Coast, they release sets to sell those sets, right? This is not shocking to people. It is a product that is designed to sell product, right? It's $1 billion brand. They got to make the money. Yep. And so when they release products into specific formats in order to invigorate competitive play in that format, so that people will buy it, right? Yeah. Like that is not shocking either. But Modern Horizons 3 came out, which is printed directly into the Modern format, and it did that to such an extent that it made me uninterested in playing the format any longer. Just it was so impactful. And I played I was actually able to string together 3 separate pre-releases for it, and I like played in a few tournaments right at the beginning of it, and like that was okay, but I don't find the play patterns that the cards they printed into the format changed the play patterns of the format in such a way that I just don't find it as interesting anymore, right? Like the idea that they printed a strictly better lightning bolt.
Yeah.
In what? Not galvanic blast, but
galvanic discharge.
The discharge, thank you. Right? It's just a better lightning bolt. That's a bummer, right? Like it just sucks. Like I'm not interested in that. I like the idea of there being within formats certain kinds of powerful expression that they kind of remain in a realm of their own, right? I like the idea there. I like the idea of like 3 damage for 1 red is a pillar, and it means something. And it changes the way the format works. And Modern Horizons 3 didn't do that. They printed cards very specifically to interfere with the pillars of the format. And I totally get that. That makes sense. You've got to invigorate competitive play in some way, whatever. But it changed those, it moved the chains in certain ways that I was not interested in. So I kind of gave it up. So I really have not, other than... So, Modern Horizons 3 came out, last summer? Somewhere around there?
I believe
July?
so, yeah. Yeah.
Somewhere in there. So the only competitive Magic I've played in a couple Pauper events, those are still fun, I guess. And I've played in all the pre-releases since then. But other than that, I have not played very much competitive Magic. And when I do, it's drafting on Magic Arena.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of was interested in Modern prior to MH3, then basically started playing it kind of like actively around MH3 time, and that is kind of so I'm someone who like goes back to the archive and looks at like the history of the format, but that unfortunately kind of that is where I came in. Listener, I know this might be a little bit opaque, but I'll say that the set that Cameron is referring to, the deck that I earlier referred to being the thing that I play in competitive events, is basically almost entirely made up of cards from Modern Horizons 3. Like it is a release that basically shifted the entire kind of like competitive ecosystem of that format. And I guess that's sort of one thing that I find interesting about Magic, and this is actually like weirdly I started Magic in grad school, and a colleague introduced me to it, and then we played Commander together because it's, the casual kind of onboard into Magic. And then a reason that I kind of switched to pseudo-competitive Warhammer for a bit, honestly, was I appreciated, and I've come to appreciate this a little less as my disposable income level has gone down, that there's no speculative economy around minis where there is about Magic.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, like in the same, or I mean, not in the same way.
If you want something, depending on what you're building and what you're after, right? I mean, some things.
Yeah, well, I guess by which I mean, like,
clearly you have not followed my my journey to getting a Spoilpox Scrivener recently.
But
yeah, you're right. There is not a hey, a new thing is coming out. Really interesting that all the cards that might interface with that card have now gone up 700% over the past several. Yeah. There's none of that stuff.
Yeah. It's like I can buy an Adeptus Mechanicus guy on stilts for $40, and he will always be $40. It'll always be overpriced, but he's always $40.
Yeah. There's not a secondary market that that is entirely predatory on the fact that people enjoy the game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I guess I'm kind of curious about, like, and you've been saying you play draft, and I would say that is a way of playing Magic where like the price for entry is pretty much constant. I mean, like like prices of packs can like go up, but like stores hold events, and the events tend to be priced the same, adjusting for inflation. Yeah. And I guess, like, how does something that I've always found very weird about Magic is that I think it is fundamentally an economy first and a game second. Or you have to, if you want to play competitively, you need to engage with the economy before you can really, before you can actually play the game. And like the genius, I guess, of Commander is that it gives a sort of a game, like it is a game onboarding for the economy that you'll then get looped into the economy so you can keep playing the game. at a more competitive level, I guess, which, is the thing that happened with me. I started playing Commander. I happened to be playing Commander with a guy that used to play competitive Standard, and then we got very sweaty when we played Commander. I guess what I'm curious about is, like, yeah, in, like, the shape, and I'm just going to keep asking about the book, because I want the spoilers, but, yeah, I guess, how does that, like, you've talked about, like, the way that WotC kind of folds fan labor into, into what the game becomes, and this is something that you talked about in the Too Much Future episode, kind of about, like, how Universes Beyond is another example of this, people making custom Magic cards, and then them seeing that and going, oh, we can monetize this.
Yeah.
I guess, like, yeah, how does that kind of, like, the primacy, or the sort of, like, the primacy of the economic, I guess, or the way that to play competitive Magic you need to kind of deal with the secondary market, I guess, like, in what way does, like, the obviousness, I suppose, of the economic aspect of this game kind of, like, what role does that play in the book, or, like, how do you sort of, like, how do you engage with that as a player? Like, how does it sort of affect your impression of, like, what the game is? These are kind of, like, all very imprecise questions, but, like, this is sort of a...
I mean, I would say that is a fact that is addressed in the book, but is not a focus of the book. Meaning, like, I think that's a topic that needs its own 230 pages or so, which is, like, the Magic economy is its own living creature, right? And in some ways... the thing that WotC does is manage an economy, right, in a very real way, right? Even just the booster packs themselves, right, a random assortment of 15-ish cards, depending on what the thing is, right, but a random assortment of cards that are sold to you as an opportunity to open certain things, right? They're literally a speculative package that you can purchase, right? And they operate that way, right? Like, I have plenty of unopened packs of cards that are worth way more money than anything. Well, not anything, but the 95% of the things I could open in them, right? They're sitting in my closet. At some point, I will dump them all, right? And I will walk away with a few $100s. I mean, it's real stuff. Real cash in the thing, and that's worth so much more. Certainly if I busted all those packs, the likelihood that I would make more money on it is basically zero. There's so much common and uncommon trash in them, it's not worthwhile. And so, like, this is something I talk about in The World is Born from Zero, my book on science fiction games, right? That I'm really interested in what is the smallest possible unit of a thing, right? What is the atomic level? And that book I talk about, what I call the mechanic of speculation, which is like, what happens when you make a micro decision in a game that asks you to think about what could occur, right? What is the smallest unit of speculation that you can engage with, right? And so in that book, I talk about the click as one of that, the button press, all these different things, right? That you have a predictable future or predictable possibility, but it's not necessarily an exhausted future. And if that's the case, then what does it mean for how we engage with speculation? I'm similarly interested in that in the Magic book because, kind of the smallest unit of economic engagement that you can have in Magic is buying a booster pack, spending your $5 or whatever, right? And that opens you into a larger economy, but a much more predictable economy in some ways, right? Like, once I know what all the cards I have in my pack are, I can then trade them with you, right? And we can, this is the dream of the 90s, right? We'll have a trading card game, right? Or I can engage in a speculative economy. I can hoard those cards, right? And hope that the value becomes greater at some point in life or in time. I can just turn them into cash. I can liquidate them, right, and turn them into a fungible, literally money, right? Cards are money. I could use them to pay other people for things, right? Like, we've all been in a situation, or maybe you haven't, but you could, if you're a big enough nerd, be in a situation where you've bought things from other people, paying for them with Magic cards, right? They are money. They are tender in some kind of way. And so I would say that where the Magic economy stuff comes up in the book the most is really in the opening salvo, which is like, this is a truth of the game that you cannot get around, right? That every other thing we say about it, what we talk about professional play, what we talk about when we talk about the narrative layers of the game, right? When we talk about these other modes of investment, of any of the other stuff, right? it all begins fundamentally, right, from a position of I am more or less likely to buy a little speculative packet that can fit in my pocket. It might contain a lot of money in it, or cards I want, and those are sometimes the same thing, right? So like, but I think like a good, strong analysis of the economics of Magic, and really how the economics of Magic are just the economics of the games industry at this point, right? Like, the booster pack is it's the loot box, right? It's the gotcha box. It's the gotcha game, and that is everything now, right? Like if you're just looking at like where does the money come from, it comes from, to say it charitably, speculative, the purchase of speculative services, right? Which is like, I spend money in the game to receive a kind of pseudo commodity that that tickles my brain of what it could be, right? To say it much more cynically, gambling, right? That's the other word for it. You know, that doesn't start entirely with Magic, but Magic certainly is the thing that in 1993 appears on the scene and demonstrates to everyone in the physical games industry that this is a viable pathway to monetization. And the way that you know that is that every possible game that thought it could produce a collectible card game did immediately. I've just closed up like a year-long research project on what I called the also-rans. And it's going to come out as 1 or 2 articles. But, you know, like SimCity has a competitive card game. Yeah, it's also built for solo play, by the way. In case you're interested.
All right.
I've got a bunch of starter decks and a booster box. If you're interested, I'm not going to go down that path, but you're welcome to them if you want to check those out at some point.
I'm going to flag that as a review for later. Yes.
They're really bizarre. Some of the cards are like the special card, the rare or whatever, and the thing is like a double length card. So the booster packs are like really long. Or it's maybe not double. It's like 1.5 or something like that.
Okay. Still though.
It's the whole thing is really weird, but right, everyone saw it. They were like, "Oh my God, they're printing money over there. We got to print money, right?" And it allowed Wizards of the Coast again to become, now I believe in 2025 or as of 20. Well, you know, I don't know. There's the weird investor lawsuit going on right now about them misrepresenting or allegedly misrepresenting the amount of stock and sales they were doing in Magic. But last year, Wizards of the Coast was on brand to have $2 billion franchises, right? So D&D and Magic the Gathering. I think both have contracted a little bit actually over projections, so maybe they're not both at $1 billion, but that was the notion, right? They're $800 million each, you know, in terms of value of that brand per year, and so it works, right? And I do think, you know, as someone who thinks a lot about speculation, who thinks a lot about possibility, who thinks a lot about imagination, right? Like, I believe it is because they've locked into that. And I think you're right. Have developed an economy that's fundamentally based on that, right? This little like black box speculative property that then turns into this broader collective economy. And it's wild going to the things, right? I went to Magic Con Las Vegas, right? Have you gone to Magic Con yet?
No, I haven't.
Magic Con Atlanta's in September.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it, honestly.
They're worth going to. I don't know. For like a random human being, I don't know, but like if someone is interested in Magic and like looking at what the biggest emanations of that are, and what are all the different kind of, I don't know, emanations of the game, what brings someone there, what makes someone in 2025 invested in Magic as its own kind of thing. It's where you get to index all of that, right? Like just fundamentally, it's where you can see the artist alley that is full of people from opening to closing every day, right? And like, I know those people exist. I'm one of those people. I like Magic art. I look at a lot of Magic art. You know, I used to write the thing for Pace that was just like ranking the vibes of cards essentially. And I think, you know, maybe prelude for people on here, probably going to go back to doing that soon for Pace. So that'll be fun.
Nice.
But it's just like, I like this art. Let me tell you about it, right? Those people are there. Some of them that's their whole experience of the thing is going and getting a bunch of cards signed. I spent way too much money at Magic Con Vegas just getting cards signed and buying artist proofs. I'm not even that guy, but like there's something about the, you know, the experience of doing it, right? I also bought an Alpha Lightning Bolt while I was there because I was like, why not? I'm going wild. I spent
Hell
way too
yeah.
much money on that. It was even better because they had it labeled as a beta bolt, and it wasn't. It is absolutely an alpha lightning bolt. I brought it back, and like I have a colleague I work with who's like way into Magic, and he placed it like maybe the second Nationals. I found the original Duelist magazine that has him like listed. He's like number 32 or something. He's like, he's in the top 50. And I was like, here you are. Like copied it out for him and gave it to him. Yeah. Oh. But he's like, wow, I remember it. And he can remember all the decks he played against. It's like a wild thing. But yeah, I like brought it back. I was like, I think this is an alpha bolt. Let's look. And like, yeah, we like both got way into it. But that's all to say that like, to go back to your originary question, yeah, it's all economic, right? It's all money. It's all these different kind of flows of engagement and money. And for the book, I've had to like kind of just choose which segments of that I go for. But it's all, I think you're right. It's all based on a very specific, company store kind of, company script logic, right?
Yeah.
That interfaces with real money in some ways, but in lots of ways doesn't, right? Let's not forget that some of the earliest crypto exchanges came out of Magic online. Yeah. Those things are all attached to one another. So that's it doesn't get its own chapter in the book, but that's like very strong. Like you can't talk about any of this without going through that first.
For sure. So you have a hard out coming up, and I guess just by way of kind of conclusion, because I mean there's so many things I would love to ask you, but hey, time is time.
Yeah, I can come back one day too.
Yeah, I would love that. Yeah, I guess just for right now, by way of closing, what you playing lately? What have you watched lately that's been cool? Just neat things.
What have I watched? I'm watching that Paramount Plus series Mobland. You watching that thing?
No. How is that? I've heard.
It's just got Tom Hardy in it. Me and Tom Hardy being a little crime guy.
Okay.
Patty Considine, got Helen Mirren, got Pierce Brosnan. I've been really on a Pierce Brosnan kick on accident recently because he's just an absolute like big weirdo. Like my man just like aims for the fences every time, and so it's just like him being kind of a weird Irish mob guy. So I've been watching that. It's been like a real thing. Cool. My wife is very into Survivor, and so we just finished the most recent season of Survivor. Survivor is nightmare trash. Like it really and truly is just like it's a terrible game. Like beyond that, it is a terrible show to watch. I do not enjoy it fundamentally, but I have to admit, bizarrely compelling sometimes.
Yeah.
Do you watch Survivor? Have you watched this last season?
I have watched. I've not watched the last season. Whenever I go home, I end up watching a lot of Survivor with my mom, and she's been watching like older, at least when I went home last, watching older seasons of it, and I watched it as a kid with her too, and yeah, just I hate it. I hate everything it's about, but also I do find it weirdly compelling. Frankly,
I like when there's like a person who's like an absolute monster. Like Russell Hantz, perhaps not the best person in the world. I have no attachment to Russell Hantz as an individual. But in terms of a player, just a nightmare human and deeply enjoyable to watch. This most recent season, I don't want to spoil it for anyone who cares. but I will say there's something really aesthetically bizarre that began happening in this last season where in moments of duress for a particular player, it would turn into almost art cinema. So it would go into like hyper slow-mo, and it would be really zoomed in on his face, and it would be like a fly buzzing around, bzzz, like running around him. Or it would be like he would be breathing, so you get this like close-up of his nose, he'd be like huffing and puffing. And I've seen lots of Survivor at this point. That has never happened before, even one time. And it seems like they just didn't have enough going on. They were like, all right, we're going to take a little like an editor's swing at this to like really like, immerse you, for lack of a better term, in the absolute banality of the show, which is just like, in the new era of Survivor, they're just playing the same games on the same island in Fiji over and over again. Yeah. It's not interesting anymore.
Yeah.
And so I like that. I like that, like, everyone knows they're bored, so they just don't care, and they're going to continue to do it. But so that's what I've been doing. I watched Thelma and Louise the other day. That movie holds up. That movie's great.
Nice. Hell yeah.
Trying to think
Cool.
what else I got going on here. I imported the new Blair Witch Project set. I haven't watched it yet. I had to import it from England.
All right.
So I could see all the different cuts of the Blair Witch Project. I like that movie a lot.
Yeah, movie's good.
Yeah, that's about it.
Cool. All right. Well, yeah, no, just as a quick note, yeah, that is my mother's chief complaint about Survivor now, is that it's the same island, the same games every time. No variation.
Yeah, she's right.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Cameron, for joining us. Just, as a reminder, if you want to kind of like say where people can find more of you, just as a way to finally sign off. I know you have before.
Yeah, I got off the evil website, x.com. I got off of that. I mean, I'm not off. You can still follow me over there if you want to, but I wouldn't encourage you to engage in that website at all. At this point, it's kind of a nightmare zone. I mean, I guess if you want to hear about like white genocide in South Africa, I hear it's a really good place to learn about that stuff. But as of this week, I'm really like pinpointing where we're recording this. Grok, my favorite place to learn about white genocide. But so you can follow me over there, and we're on Range Touch there, but we don't really use those accounts. I'm much more active on Blue Sky. A little bit of an easier lift these days. You can go to rangetouch.com, and any of the shows that we mentioned, you can put those into any podcast thing of your choice, and you'll be able to find them. They're fun. They're interesting. I don't monologue on any of them as much as I did here. So like if you're like, I like listening to him, but maybe he should talk less. Well, you can go to the other shows, and you get slightly less. So, but yeah, hopefully you like those. I think the shows are good. Let me say, I think we make a good thing. People like it, and you can always go to patreon.com/rangetouch in order to give me money for it.
Yeah, and I will say I agree. Range Touch, all the Range Touch properties, very, very good. And Cameron, I brought you on because I wanted to listen to you talk, and I presume people are going to listen because they want to listen to you talk, because you have a lot of cool things to say, and I'm very, very thankful that you were here. But yeah, I think that's going to do us for this first episode of the Visual Decay podcast. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.